And what we are saying is we should sanction human rights violators, who, by the way, happen to be people that travel to the U.S. with impunity, buy properties in the United States, laugh at us along the way, invest in our banks, send their kids to our school. They have zero respect for this government. What I have heard here today in response is, we don't want to sanction these people because it might unite them against us. Let me give you a brief bulletin. They are already united against us, other than the fact that when they come here to benefit from our free society on weekends in Miami, and then go back and live off their newfound millions and billions that they've stolen from the people of Venezuela. This is not a hearing on oil sanctions. There is no bill before us to sanction oil in Venezuela. This is a bill that we are hopefully going to get to sanction human rights violators in Venezuela. What I have heard today is we should not sanction human rights violators because it might disrupt the process that is going on in Venezuela. Well, we sanction human rights violators in Russia. Why is what's happening in Russia more important than what's happening in Venezuela? We sanction human rights violators all the time, personally, individually. And we have their names. These aren't even hard to find. These people brag about what they're doing in Venezuela. The only difference between those sanctions, those people and others, is they spend their weekends in Miami. They spend their weekends in Florida. Mr. Malinowski, you have in your statement, you talk about Global Vision, which was once an independent television operation within Venezuela that actually covered news. What happened to Global Vision? It was given over to allies of the Maduro regime and the Chavez regime. It is now a propaganda arm of Venezuela. Do you know where they live? Do you know where they live? They live in Miami. They own a multi-million-dollar mansion in Coco Plum, in a very exclusive neighborhood in Miami. They drive up and down the streets in their fancy cars. They laugh at you and they laugh at us because they know they can get away with these things. So I guess what I'm asking is it now the policy of the United... Let me ask you this. Who in the opposition in Venezuela has asked you not to impose sanctions against human rights violators because it might disrupt the dialogue? Who has asked you not to do that? Either one of you. Who has asked you not to impose sanctions against human rights violators among the opposition in Venezuela?
Senator, I'm just not comfortable sitting here and giving you individual names. Members of the MOOD who are participating in the dialogue have discussed this. Listen
to what you just told me. You're not comfortable telling me their names because you fear for their safety. What kind of dialogue is that?
Because
what kind of dialogue is that, or the people that are involved in the dialogue can't tell you what they really believe? That's a fake dialogue. Guys, so is it the policy now of the United States that we will look as long as this dialogue is somewhat successful, we're going to forget the human rights violations? So we'll just send a statement to condemn them, but we won't do anything about it.
Absolutely not, and I think we've both said that we will speak out, we will make statements, but we will also consider those sanctions, as Assistant Secretary Malinowski said, we will keep considering that, and we will use those when we think the time is right.
So there's a timing element when it comes to human rights violations? In essence, there comes a time when human rights violations are ripe?
There's a timing element when it comes to the response of a particular tactic on human rights violations, not our condemnation.
Give me an example where we have held back on human rights violation sanctions because of timing, anywhere else in the world. Give me an example of when the U.S. has said, we know you've committed human rights violations, but we're not going to sanction you because we're waiting for something else to happen. Give me an example of when we've done that successfully. Mr. Malinowski, you've been involved in this.